Welcome to Creekside Book by Book. Tonight we're going to finish up Judges. And if you've already heard this, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do a little bit of introduction for the last few chapters of Judges. And this is, if you are watching this later, there are some things that we're going to look at tonight that are particularly violent and kind of intense. And so I just encourage you to listen to this maybe without children, or throw in a headphone or ear pod or something, and hear this. It's important information that we're going over the history of the people of Israel, and the writer is doing everything in such a way as to show us the downfall of the people as they continue to fall into the trap of what is the common refrain throughout these last chapters. In those days, Israel had no king, and everybody did what they saw fit in their own eyes. And so it started out with battle between the tribes of Israel and the Canaanites, and then it's going to end here tonight with actually battle between the tribes of Israel. And so civil war, and that will be triggered by a great offense that's going to happen in one of the cities, and but then that also will be highlighting the one tribe that we haven't really looked at all throughout the whole book. So far, every tribe that has inherited land in Israel has a representative in the book of Judges. Some are big and spectacular, like Samson, but then there's others who are more small scale, like Tola, right? And so we have a wide range of leaders, but every tribe is represented. But tonight, it's going to kick off with the one tribe that has not been present so far, and that is the Levites. And one of the reasons why we could see that the Levites, we could say the Levites are saved for last. There's a couple different things that I think could be key parts. One, the Levites have no inherited large sections of land, as the other tribes do. And so that might be why they're saved for last. But also, I think the writer is intentionally trying to give us a picture of just why the nation fell apart. And while there was no king, they were supposed to have leadership represented by the tribe of Levi. But today we'll see the Levites in this passage. They're not holding up to the responsibility of leading the people in ways that honor God. And so so now we've seen all these other judges, and now we're going to see the Levites represented, and they're going to be not great. So we're going to go 17 through 21, and I'm going to go through a lot of content tonight, but we will finish out Judges. So just let's start with verse 1. Now, a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living with the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year. Your clothes will and your food. So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." So this is how chapter 17 opens up this last section of the book of Judges. And we should also note, we don't have a firm grasp on timeline here. So these events actually could have happened earlier in the book of Judges. They don't necessarily have to have happened after Samson. And we'll see why when we see some names later on. But this is fairly quickly after that first generation of leaders go into the land, is what most of the commentators say. The people are already falling away from faithfulness to the Lord. And the key person here is Micah. We meet this guy in Ephraim, Micah, who stole money from his mom, 1,100 shekels of silver, which, if you remember, that's how much the Philistines gave to Delilah to try to get Samson, the secret of Samson's strength. And so Micah is now, we jump in, Micah stole 1,100 pieces of silver from his mom, shekels of silver from his mom, and he heard that she put a curse on whoever took it. And so he brings it back because he doesn't want to be under a curse, not because it doesn't seem like he did that because he felt like he was wrong. He just didn't want to receive a curse. And his mom is gracious and she blesses him. But then she also consecrates some of this money. She's making from a curse to an oath. She's making an oath to the Lord to consecrate some of this money. And what does she do with it? She sets it up aside to make an idol, which is the second commandment: thou shalt have no other gods before me. Do not make any graven images. Like this is bad what she's doing. But the people are already moving quickly away from the way that the Lord wants them to live. They're not supposed to make any idols, but she set aside money, set aside the silver to do this, and Micah goes ahead and makes it happen. And Micah starts to build something a little bit more for himself because he made a little shrine. And the people of Israel, they were supposed to go to wherever the tabernacle was to do all of their worship, their sacrifices, all of that stuff. But what Micah is doing in Ephraim is establishing for himself a little religious center, and so this is also not good. And he then, instead of having even Levites in his town do this, he appoints one of his sons first, which is, again, not good. He is not supposed to do any of these things. And so he appoints one of his sons to be a priest. But then this other guy, this priest from Bethlehem, he's leaving his town. And because the Levites didn't have any inherited tracts of land, it wouldn't have been uncommon for Levites to go to find a place that they could serve the community. And so as he's traveling, he runs into Micah, and Micah's like, "Oh, you're a Levite? Great. I've got a shrine over here. Will you be my priest?" Which, again, not great. But the Levite says, sure, because he is given by Micah food, clothes, lodging. He's got it all set up, and Micah's going to take care of him. And so he takes this position, and it is a terrible, terrible open to this book, to this last few sections, because the priests now are a representative of the priests here is already turning away from faithfulness to the Lord. Now, this priest, we don't know his name yet, but in the next chapter, we will learn that he is Jonathan, the son of Gershom. Gershom is the son of Moses. So this is how we see that this is an early event in the life of the people of Israel. This is 2 generations from Moses. And already this Levite is turning away from faithfulness. The people are building idols in their town, in their hometowns. And Micah is well enough has enough money to say, I'm going to support a priest and I'll treat him like my own son. And he'll be a father to me and I'll be a son to him. But there's a role reversal there. And so all of this gets just confused. It's not good. And so Micah has opened up this door and the Levite has walked through. And so one of the things that, we should be mindful as we look at a passage like this is, there are times where there are opportunities that just look so good. And that's one of these times where it's like, this is a looking good opportunity. And so the Levites say, yeah, I'll be taken care of. This is great. But sometimes things look good and they look too good to be true or too good to be right. This is one of those times that this is too good to be right. And nobody is calling them out on that. And the writer points this out. In those days, Israel had no king and everybody did whatever they saw fit in their own eyes. And so we're going to hear that a few times tonight. Chapter 18, because there's more to the story. And in those days, Israel had no king. Verse 1 of chapter 18. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah to Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go explore the land. So this is an important note here is the tribe of Dan, their allotted land was right next to bordering with the Philistines. And so the Philistines were difficult and it was hard to go and take the land that Dan was supposed to take as their inheritance. And so instead, what the Danites do is they send these 5 spies north. So they go up to the edge of the territory of the people of Israel, and they're going to go look for land that they can conquer. And so they're going to go through Ephraim, which is where Micah is in the next paragraph here. So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned in there and asked him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here? He told them what Micah had done for him, and he said, he has hired me, and I am his priest. Then they said to him, please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful. The priest answered them, go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval. So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, how did you find things? And they answered, come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you will find an unsuspecting people and a spacious land that God has put into your hands, a land that lacks nothing whatever. So here are these 5 spies that go to Micah's house and they're like, hey, you've got a priest here. Ask the Lord if we'll be successful. All these things, like they're like seekers. They don't know necessarily the Danites, what's going on here. But Micah is like, yeah, go ahead. The Lord is with you. And so they go, they see it's good. Everything's coming up for the Danites here. They're going to go and try to take this land that is called Laish. And so because they were unwilling to fight the Philistines, unwilling to take the land that God had given to them, they're going to try to find their own path. In those days, Israel had no king. Everybody did whatever they saw fit. And this is one of those times Dan is saying, we're going to do what we can to secure our own future instead of doing what God told us to do in the land that he gave us. Verse 11, then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. This is why the place west of Kiriath Jearim is called Dan to this day. From there, they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet, don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better than that you serve a tribe and clan in Israel as priest rather than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idol and went along with the people. So the Danites, they've got this priest that they know about at Micah's house. And so they're working their way back up to Laish, where they're going to try to conquer the town. And so they go, but they stop in at Micah's house because they're like, "Hey, Micah's got like some good luck charms over there. His ephod, his household gods, his idol, all of these things, like they gave us a favorable report." And so like, even when it says here, "You know what to do," like the answer is like, go destroy the idols. This is not right in the nation of Israel. Someone's got to put a stop to this. But instead they're like, go take them and let's bring them with us because we want the favor of Micah's household gods and this idol. And the priest's like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. How do you feel about a promotion? You've got this one household, Micah, you can be his priest, or you can be priest for the whole tribe of Dan as we settle in this new land." And again, this priest is like, what a great solution. Bigger is better. And so he goes with them along with the people. But the Danites know that this is not going to be well. And so verse 21, putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. And so they did this because they know that Micah is going to respond. And so they don't want Micah to attack their possessions behind them. So they're all in front of them so they can defend. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you called out your men to fight?" He replied, "You took the gods I made and my priests and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask, what's the matter with you?" The Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. So Micah tries to rescue his false god and this wayward prophet or priest, but the 600 fighting men are too much for Micah's small army, and so he had to go home empty-handed. And so the gods that he had made were completely unable to avert the catastrophe of losing everything. And there is this wonderful little, like, just dig right at the people and their idolatry here. The writer of Judges is mocking idolatry and pointing out how worthless it is. Somebody can come and just take your idols and you lose everything. That's not worth it. It's not worth it to give your life over to idols. 27. Then they took what Micah had made and his priests and went on to Laish against a people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel, though the city used to be called Laish. There, the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the people, captivity of the land. they continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. So they go and they attack Laish and they win. And then they set up their own little worship center up there. And in a few hundred years after these events, Jeroboam will split the people, the kingdom, and the northern tribes will separate basically from Jerusalem north, and Jeroboam will set up in the northern tribes of Israel 2 worship centers for their pagan practices. One is in Beersheba, which is towards the south end of their territory. The other one is in Dan, which is the north end. And when they set up their territory in Dan, they already had priests there doing their false worship. It was already established. And it goes all the way back to this event. And so when we read this in, this will be in 1 Kings, when we read about the split of the nation, we need to remember this is why Dan was selected, because there were already priests there. There was already false worship happening there. And so all of these, the beginning here, the Levite is pursuing his own opportunities and he's leading the people, but he's really just doing whatever the people want him to do. And later on in the prophets, I'm pretty sure it's Jeremiah, will talk about how the false prophets of his time just tell the people what they want to hear. And this is an example of this priest doing whatever Micah wants, doing whatever the tribe of Dan wants. But the priests were supposed to bring God's word to the people and help them walk in faithfulness. And here we have an example of Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, already turning away from that faithfulness. And so the Levites, who should have been a moral influence on the nation, are dropping the ball already. And now here is another story of the Levites. And this is the one that's going to be pretty violent and intense. So chapter 19, verse 1, in those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem in Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day, they got up early and he prepared to leave, but the woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go. So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, please stay tonight and enjoy yourself. And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the woman's father said, refresh yourself, wait till afternoon. So the 2 of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning, you can get up and be on your way home. Verse 10, but unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. And so this first part of this story, we have this unfaithful concubine. Now, a concubine was not a wife. It was a relationship that was a step down from wife. Often in the ancient world, concubines were brought into the family because the wife was unable to conceive. And so that could be what's happening here. This woman, this Levite's first wife was unable to conceive. And so they brought in a concubine. Again, not ideal. This is not a good situation, not God's design. Okay. And so this is happening though. And Judges is just telling us what happened. It's not saying, go do this. And so after a period of time, like she's unfaithful to him, and that could be that she was sexually promiscuous, or it could be that she did not want to be with him anymore and just left. Like that, there's seems to be some uncertainty there on what that means here. But regardless, she left, didn't want to be with him. 4 months go by, he wants to go and reconcile, and the father welcomes him into the house. And the father shows great hospitality to this man, and he's with him for 4 days, feeding him, giving him lodging, wanting him to stay. And it could be that the father wanted this Levite, to just stay with them, just be a part of their family, maybe. And there's a contrast that's going on here, because there's such great hospitality here at this woman's family home. But we're going to see that as they leave, there is not great hospitality for them in the future. So let's pick up in verse 11. When they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come on, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into any city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." He added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way from Bethlehem in Judea to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judea, and now I am going to the house of the Lord in Shiloh. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants. Me, the woman, and the young man with us, we don't need anything." "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need, only do not spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. So the attendant of the Levite is like, "Let's just go to Jebus," which is going to be Jerusalem later. But the Levite's like, "No, we can't go in there because it's not Israelites. We want to go to an Israelite city because there are people, there are our kinsmen, and we will be safe." And as we read this story, the writer is framing it in such a way as to make us think about the story of Lot, because Lot it welcomes the visitors, the angelic visitors, and sees them and brings them into his house. And they're from the city square into the house. And so here we have a Levite in the city square, vulnerable, and nowhere to go. And they were content to just stay there, not knowing the dynamics of Gibeah. But the old man was like, "No, you cannot stay here. This is not a safe place to be. So come and stay with me." And so the old man is extending some hospitality to these visitors from another town. And maybe he was the only one who seemed righteous. But verse 22, while they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of this city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said, "No, my friends, do not be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do with them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them. And they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something. So speak up." So here we have a repeat of the Sodom story. And the men of Gibeah want to rape the man. They want to force themselves on this Levite. And the host says no. And you're like, oh, wow, this seems like a good dude. But then he says, here's my virgin daughter and this other man's concubine. Have them. Which, as we read it, it's like, what? What? This is awful. And again, the writer of Judges is not excusing this behavior. He's pointing out this is terrible. That's why it's in here. The people of Israel have fallen so far from what they should be doing as they live for the Lord that they are becoming like Sodom. And even the man who welcomes the Levite into his house is not any better than the people, because he is willing to hand over his daughter and the concubine, but then the Levite just throws his concubine out into the street. The concubine who he went to go and bring back home, whose father gave him such incredible hospitality, who wanted him to stay home. He then throws his partner out and they abuse her and basically leave her for dead on this doorstep. It's all bad. It's all bad. And the Levite's attitude towards her when he sees her there, just get up, let's go. And then she doesn't answer. So he takes her home. She dies probably somewhere along the way. And he cuts her up and mails her to all the tribes. And it's all bad. It's all bad. But these different parts of the concubine, these pieces of her, are sent as a message to the tribes saying, look at what is the evil that is going on here in Gibeah. And so they must respond. So chapter 20 is the response. Then all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, and so that is from the north to the south. Beersheba is like the southernmost point. Dan is the northernmost point. From the land of Gilead came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their places in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 men armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, tell us how this awful thing happened. So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gibeah in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now, all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do. All the Israelites rose up together as one, saying, none of us will go home. Not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we'll do in Gibeah. We'll go up against it in the order decided by casting lots. We'll take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000 to get provisions for the army. Then when the army arrives at Gibeah and Benjamin, it can give them what they deserve for this outrageous act done in Israel. So all the Israelites got together and united as one against the city. So restating the problem, and then the Levite says, so what are we going to do about it? And so they say, we're going to go attack the people of Gibeah. We're going to go attack Benjamin. They allowed this terrible thing to happen. And so we are going to get justice. And so throughout the book of Judges, we have seen the people of Israel divided, ununified, disunified, without unity. And now they're unified against themselves. And so we have this civil war in Israel that is happening as a way to try to bring about justice. And so they're going to go and attack. Now, what's missing here? No one consulted the Lord. No one, they're going to cast lots to determine who goes first, but it seems like they're missing some important parts of seeing what God wants them to do. And if there's a Levite right in front of them who could help them, but no, they're focusing on vengeance. So verse 12, the tribes of Israel sent messengers throughout the tribe of Benjamin saying, what about this awful crime that was committed among you? Now turn those wicked men of Gibeah over to us so that we may put them to death and purge this evil from Israel. But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns, they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once, the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Now, this left-handed note here, last time we saw a left-handed soldier was Ehud. And here the way they're talking about left-handed, and this could be also with Ehud, we're not totally sure, is that they were trained to be ambidextrous. And so the left-handed warriors were able to sling a stone, and the slingshot was not just like Dennis the Menace slingshot, but it is a leather pouch that could fling a rock at 90 miles an hour. Like it was great accuracy, and so they're very dangerous. And so they're all gearing up for war. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. So now they're asking God through their lots, who of us is to go up first to fight against the Benjamite? And the Lord replied, Judah shall go first. The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched a camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went out to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them at Gibeah. The Benjamites came out from Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another and they again took up their positions where they had stationed themselves that first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord. They said, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites? The Lord answered, go up against them. The Israelites drew near Benjamin the second day. This time, when the Benjamites came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. So they are at war. They are attacking the Benjamites. But what's interesting here, as we look at these encounters, they say, who shall go up first? The Lord replied, Judah. The Lord did not say, you will win, right? The next one, who shall go up? Shall we go up and fight the Benjamites? The Lord answered, go up against them. The Lord did not say, you shall win. I think that there is some intentionality here, and what God is telling them to do is, go fight. You think this is going to solve your problems? This isn't going to solve your problems, but fight. Everybody in the nation is guilty of bloodshed. Everybody in the nation is veering away from God's design. And so he's not necessarily protecting them from themselves as well. So verse 26, then all the Israelites, the whole army, went up to Bethel. And there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the ark of the covenant of God was there at Bethel, not at Shiloh, with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar. Now, Phinehas, we read about in the book of Joshua. So this is still in that first generation. The son of Aaron was ministering before it. They asked, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not? The Lord responded, go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands. Then Israel set an ambush around Gibeah. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Gibeah as they had done before. The Benjamites came out to meet them and were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that about 30 men fell in the open field on the roads, the one leading to Bethel and the other to Gibeah. While the Benjamites were saying, "We are defeating them as before," the Israelites were saying, "Let's retreat and draw them away from the city to the roads." All the men of Israel moved from their places and took up positions at Baal Tamar, and the Israelites' ambush charged out of its place on the west of Gibeah. The 10,000 of Israel's able young men made a frontal attack on Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day, the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. Then the Benjamites saw that they were beaten. So this next encounter, they offer sacrifices, they inquire of the Lord, what is going on? Will we win? And this third time now, the Lord says, yes, I will deliver them into your hands. And so they set up this ambush, which is a lot like how they attacked Ai in the book of Joshua, like attack and then retreat, draw your forces away, and then go and attack the city. And so that's what happens, and it works. And 25,100 Benjamites are killed. The next section here. Now the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin because they relied on the ambush that they had set near Gibeah. Those who had been in ambush made a sudden dash into Gibeah, spread out, and put the whole city to the sword. The Israelites had arranged with the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and then the Israelites could counterattack. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on the Israelites, about 30, and they said, "We are defeating them as in the first battle." But when the column of smoke began to rise from the city, the Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. Then the Israelites counterattacked, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized that disaster had come on them. So they fled before the Israelites into the direction of the wilderness, but they could not escape the battle. And the Israelites who came out of the towns cut them down there. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily overran them in the vicinity of Gibeah on the east. 18,000 Benjamites fell, all of them valiant fighters. As they turned and fled toward the wilderness, the rock of Rimmon, the Israelites cut down 5,000 men along the roads. They kept pressing after the Benjamites as far as Gidom and struck down 2,000 more. On that day, 25,000 Benjamite swordmen fell, all of them valiant fighters, but 600 of them turned and fled into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. There they stayed 4 months. The men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all the towns to the sword, including the animals and everything else they found. All the towns they came across, they set on fire. So the ambush works, and they basically wipe out all of the fighting forces except for these 600 men. But then they also start to attack the other cities in Benjamin, and they treat the land of Benjamin as a holy war. They treat it like one of the Canaanite cities and the Canaanite regions in the book of Joshua. It's part of the band, the harem that is completely devoted to destruction. And so that's what they are doing, destroying cities, animals, people, killing many. And this seems like justice for them, for the unrighteousness of the people of Gibeah. But the story is not over just yet, because the men of Israel had taken an oath at Mitzpah. Not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. Now there are 600 Benjamite soldiers out there. The people went to Bethel, where they sat before God until evening, raising their voices and weeping bitterly. Lord God of Israel, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? So they make this vow. They wipe out basically most of Benjamin. They make this vow saying, we're not going to let any of our daughters marry any of those 600 men. And then they go to Bethel, the house of the Lord, and they worship God there. That's what Bethel means, house of the Lord. And they say, why has this happened? Why should one tribe be missing? Early the next day, the people built an altar and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Israelites asked, who from all the tribes of Israel has failed to assemble before the Lord? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah was to be put to death. So now they have an oath saying we're not going to let anybody marry one of our daughters. No Benjamite can marry a daughter from any of the tribes of Israel. So then they call everybody together to have this worship service, these offerings, this moment of consecration, and everybody must come. And then they look around to see who didn't come to this, and whoever doesn't come should be put to death. Now the Israelites grieved for the tribe of Benjamin, their fellow Israelites. Today, one tribe is cut off from Israel, they said. How can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? Then they asked, which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah? They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp for the assembly. For when they counted the people, they found that no one from the people of Jabesh Gilead were there. So now why would Jabesh Gilead not go? And this is an important note here, is they were closely related to the Benjamites. They were, and so this town, this region, they probably were sympathetic with the Benjamites who had just been wiped out. Maybe they thought if they could do it to them, maybe they would do it to us. And this whole worship experience is a ruse. We don't know, but we're not going. So the assembly sent 12,000 fighting men with instructions to go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Kill every male and every woman who is not a virgin. They found among the people living in Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. So they are trying to come up with a solution to their rash oath. This oath to not let a Benjamite marry any of their daughters has now led to the potential elimination of the whole tribe. And so they're like, that was a mistake, but we can't go back on our oath because that would be a mistake. So what do we do? And so they come up with a great plan and great is in heavy quotes there. They come up with this plan to try to find wives for these Benjamites that are not their daughters. Instead, it's the people of Jabesh Gilead. Now, again, all of this is bad. And the writer of Hebrews is telling us this is bad. And they're able to find 400 virgins in Jabesh Gilead that can be the wives for these Benjamites. But there's 600 soldiers. So they still have a problem because there's not enough. And these soldiers, the Benjamite soldiers, are hiding out in this area, the Rock of Rimmon. And so they go, verse 13, the whole assembly sent an offer of peace to the Benjamites at the Rock of Rimmon. So the Benjamites returned at the time and were given the women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared, but there were not enough for all of them. The people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel. The Lord had made a gap. And my eyes roll so hard right there. The Lord didn't do this. The people did this because of their disobedience. And the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs. They said, so the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We can't give them our daughters as wives since the Israelites have taken this oath. Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to a Benjamite. But look, there is an annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and the south of Lebanah. So they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and hide in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to join in the dancing, rush from the vineyards, and each of you seize one of them to be your wife. Then return to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, do us the favor of helping them, because we did not get wives for them during the war. You will not be guilty of breaking your oath because you did not give your daughter to them. You did not give. They were taken. So that is what the Benjamites did. While the young women were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and settled in them. At that time, Israelites left that place and went home to their tribes and clans, each to his own inheritance. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what they saw fit. That is the end of Judges. So they, to try to cover up their mistake, they kill many people, and then they allow for a kind of human trafficking and sex slavery to replace these wives. And then when fathers and brothers are upset about it, they just say, well, just do us a favor. All of it's bad. All of it's bad. These last chapters of Judges are given to us to show us the depravity of the people. And the last verse, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. This last verse is trying to help us see, like, the people left to their own devices are going to continue to fall away. And so we are moving in the history towards a monarchy. But the monarchy itself is not going to solve the problem. The monarchy, like, there's going to be good kings, there will be bad kings. But the one thing that the king can do is unify the people and bring them together instead of everybody doing whatever they see fit. The Levites aren't doing it. The king could do it. And so that's part of the direction that is we are heading towards. Yeah, and so there's three things that we should take away from the book of Judges. And one is the terrible consequences of people turning their back on God and their covenantal commitments. So we see this degradation of the nation as they turn their back on God. The second thing is that in spite of human failing and willful rebellion, God is gracious. God does preserve the people, even though they do not deserve it at all. As we read through this, we see their brokenness again and again. And the third truth that we should hold on to in the book of Judges is that God is sovereign. And in spite of Israel's repeated failure to live up to its covenant commitments, which led them down the path of chaos rather than to shalom, to peace, God nevertheless, and in spite of Israel, brought good out of it all. Chaos led to destruction and exile, but not death. The people of Israel survived. They endured, but their history is painful. And Judges gives us a clear picture of the painful reality of the people of Israel's life. So, y'all, we did it. We finished Judges. Any questions or thoughts? I mean, there's some heavy stuff that we read this evening. So, yeah, let me hear from you. What do you got?
It's been helpful to go through this with you because my daughter, she's almost 18. She came to me like last week. She's just been opening the Bible to go read it to go to bed, but opened to this story and was just like, "What, Mom? Like, what is this? Like, this is in the Bible. This is okay." And I'm like, "No, it's not okay." But yeah, I feel like I can have a better conversation now after going through this again with you guys. So,
well, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this story, if it's like this is one of the reasons why I never advise people just to open the Bible and start reading.
No, I know.
Like, because I know this story is in there.
Yeah, because this is a tough story, but if you read it in the whole context of the book, it makes a lot more sense.
Right. And like making sense doesn't make excuses.
No.
And that's one of the things, like when you talk to Ariel about this, like say like the writer is saying how bad this is. Like he's just giving us history.
Yeah.
And one of the things like that grieves me for even our own country today is how people are trying to ignore terrible parts of our own history.
Yeah.
And like when we do that, we are in danger of giving over to those failures in the past again, because we're not recognizing the terrible things that happen as terrible. We'd rather just ignore it. And so then we're surprised, like, can you imagine this kind of horrible activity is happening in the world? But if we would just take some time to learn some history, we would be like, yeah, this has been happening. And so the people of Israel are not unique to the terribleness of humanity. Like, we have these stories in Israel's history, but America's got our own stories. And so if we're going to take any lessons from Judges, I think one of the important lessons is like, know yourself as a people. Like, you are not above this. And so we need the grace of God to change us. So yeah, but I have some opinions. So any other thoughts or questions on these difficult passages? No? Carrie, did you have something?
Oh, of course, as always. At the beginning, my thing, I was appalled as I wrote down my first notes is, why would a Levite be acceptable to living in a house with idols when he knows better?
Yeah, there is no reason for him to want to do that. But I mean, the guy was going to pay his bills.
So he sold out for money, basically.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is. I mean, again, the Levites are not alone to the love of money. And the Bible tells us that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Yeah. And we ought to be real careful with our own hearts. And so that's one of the reasons why, like, why tithing more than a principle of the law. One of the reasons why tithing is so important for me personally is because every time I send our tithe, I am submitting my heart and my own desire for wealth to the Lord. Every time I give, I am reminding myself, everything we have is from God. Mm-hmm. It is not my ingenuity. It is not my power. It is God's provision. And when we see stories like this of a Levite who's like, oh, you're going to pay for everything? Like, it's so easy to be like, oh man, that's going to be great. And we got to just be very, very careful. So one of the pastors that I used to listen to a lot when I was younger said, was doing an offering talk at his church. And he said, generosity breaks the fingers of greed from around our hearts. Mm-hmm. And that has been a lesson that that I have found to be true again and again. And so every time we have opportunities to give to the Christmas missions offering, it's one more time, like, where my family, and largely because my wife has greater faith than me. She has faith. I actually manage the budget. And so she doesn't know all the time, like, what our financial situation is. And so she's like, let's do this. I'm like, okay. And every time God has provided. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I have some great ideas for what we could do with that kind of money. Yeah. But no, God wants to break greed from off my heart. And so, yeah, it is, so these leaders here looking for money, and then he takes the promotion to be the priest of the whole tribe. I mean,
Mhm.
Money, opportunity, those are the temptations so often in any kind of in anybody's heart, but then also in the religious leaders are not above it. And so, yeah, Judges gives us the terrible of all the people. So
For me, it just kind of shows exactly how we are, how humanity really is.
yeah,
You know? It's kind of like
yeah,
you look over and you think, gosh, this is exactly like how anybody could be. And that's at the very beginning of the Bible. It's not even just now.
right. Yeah. The same who is it? Paul, I can't remember the verse, maybe Corinthians, says, no temptation has seized you beyond what is common to man. So none of our tests and trials and temptations that we experience now, none of those are new. Like it's all the same. It might look different, but it's all the same root. And so as we read through the Bible, we're like, oh wow, that's our situation. Different outcomes maybe, but same root problem. And so, but Paul continues to say, but when you are tempted, he is faithful to provide a way out, to provide a way for you to stand up under that temptation. And so how many of the stories in Judges, as we read, can we say, if you had made one different decision, if you had prayed before you just acted, what could have changed for the people? And so, there is always a way out of the temptation that we face. And so, so Judges gives us some hard truths, but it's like looking in a mirror for our own culture today. Like, oh, we're terrible. We need the grace of God. And that is the truth throughout Scripture. So.
And I am glad that you brought up, the monarchy thing, because I wrote in my notes here, why is a monarchy so prominent in Judges for the morality of the Israelites? I mean, to me, it's like, okay, you were responsible for yourself to be moral or not. And then you said it was to unify them. So that made a lot more sense to me after that.
Yeah. And when we get to Samuel will talk about what the king will do. And it's not all good. Like he's going to tax you. He's going to make your sons go to war. I mean, he's going to put burdens on you. But I mean, the people cry out for a king, and they want to be like other nations. But I mean, God is saying like, no, this is what they need. Trust me in this. And so the first king, Saul, not a unifier, to say the least. But David does become a unifier. And Solomon is a unifier, kind of. But then the next generation, Rehoboam, breaks it apart. And so it is, and North and South both have good kings, or both have bad kings, and the South has some good kings, is what the story tells us. So, but yeah, we have this longing for a prophet, and we see these prophets like Moses in the Old Testament, but ultimately the prophet is fulfilled in Jesus. We have these, we need priests as intermediaries between us and God. And even in Levi and in Judges, the Levites, the priests are not good intermediaries. We need a king. And when we get to the kings are hit and miss. But when we get to Jesus, we have a priest, a perfect priest. We have a perfect king. We have a perfect prophet. Those three offices that we need fulfilled in Jesus. And so when you read the Bible, understanding that like, oh man, this Levite's terrible. Thank God that I have a priest who has accomplished the work for me. So anyway. Any other thoughts, questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, Sandy.
What exactly is the concubine? What I say, role it plays, or how do they use them? Are they like a concubine of this day and age, or?
I can't speak to concubines of this day and age, but in the ancient world, the a concubine was basically two things. One was a wife a sexual partner who is not a wife. And so much less commitments. With a wife, you usually had to give a dowry to the family or to the woman. With a concubine, you didn't have to do that. It was more just like, you're mine now, and you're going to live with me. And any children that the concubine had, the husband, the head of the house, would be able to say, I will adopt this to be my heir or not. So there was just the sexual nature of the role as just a sex partner that had some protections and provisions, but not equal to a wife. The other aspect of it is like, if the first wife is not able to conceive, then a person would take on a concubine as a way to have a surrogate mother, surrogate womb, and then that child that is born to the concubine, the head of the house would be able to adopt into as their own child. And so that's kind of like what Sarah and Abraham worked out with Hagar, is the same kind of thing. Like Hagar was essentially converted into a concubine that was trying to make their own plan for how to have a child for Abraham, for Abraham's inheritance. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, when I lived in Japan, they had concubines there. And
Oh.
the wife there would have the child and take care of the house and all that. And then if the husband was rich, he went out and got the concubines. And however many he could afford, they were for pleasure or sex or whatever. I didn't know if it had changed since then or before then. Or
Yeah. I mean, that's a significant part of the dynamic as well, is just a sex partner.
So
So
the wife was the needed one, and the concubines were toys.
often, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I was wondering.
so when we get to Solomon, who had 700 wives and 300 concubines, there's no need for that many wives or concubines.
Just had
yeah.
a problem.
That just sounds horrible.
I know.
Yeah. It's not good. Now,
Yeah.
Solomon has the reputation of being the wisest man in the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
What
really
a
a wise
dummy.
decision to have that many wives? And is that wise?
No, no. But then we read Ecclesiastes, and that's attributed to Solomon, and he says, like, I party like nobody else. I had everything I ever wanted. All of it was meaningless.
Yeah.
So, like, the life of Solomon is like, look at how wise he is, but how stupid he acts. And then we get to Ecclesiastes, and he's like, you know what? Everything
It
I
was
thought was
stupid.
gonna, well, that was dumb. And yeah, so that's a paraphrase for the book of Ecclesiastes. It ends with, serve the Lord, don't be an idiot. Again, paraphrase. So,
Good bumpers.
oh man, there's so many times where that's the advice you just need to give people. Stop being an idiot. You know the right thing to do. Don't be
Yeah.
dumb. People don't like hearing that.
No.
Sometimes I need to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I talk about the Holy Spirit talking to me, and I say on a Sunday, the Spirit said to me, hey, dummy, like, I know me. Like,
Mhm.
so often it's like, oh, it's so stupid. It's right there. And I need the Spirit to kind of hit me in the head and say, dummy, just pay attention. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on the end of Judges?
I'm just glad that I'm an American woman, because we're reading back on that, the mistress or the concubine, and how he shoves her out in front. And then he doesn't even ante up. He's saying, I pushed her out there. They said, well, they just raped her. It's like, well, dude, how'd she get out there in the first place?
Yeah, that is a point. That is,
Sorry to be kind of blunt, but I'm like, he didn't even ante up. I pushed her out there.
no, yeah. Well, there are several times where the people push the blame away. So even when they are grieving the loss of the Benjamites, like, Lord, why did you open up this gap in the people of Israel? It's like, God didn't do that. That may be your heart, but that God didn't do that. You did that. The people destroyed the other people.
Mhm.
So yeah, but that's not unique to Judges, because remember, go all the way back to chapter 3 of Genesis.
Right.
The woman you gave me.
Yeah.
People have been passing the buck for all of history. It's not my fault. It's the woman you gave me. Happy Mother's Day.
Started in the very beginning, didn't it?
Yeah, all the way back. All the way back. So
Now, I was just remembering previous discussions that we've had before about how in those days women were, and still are, they are basically, not their own mind. They are a tool. They are what bought and paid for kind of scenario.
mm-hmm.
So it's just hard to see that kind of a culture when you have a completely different kind of culture you live in.
Yeah. And these are hard stories to read and hard to like really get our mind around, like to say, is that really what's going on? But this kind of attitude is still happening in the world today.
Yep.
There are plenty of women who live in oppressive situations. And part of the gospel message is to bring freedom to the captives. And we should be praying and acting in a way that brings justice to these women in these kinds of situations where they're considered less than human. Like, it's awful. But yeah, we need to remember that the people of Judges are not unique. This is still a part of the world even today.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this book, like I said at the onset of this book, I love this book. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible. And as I've been evaluating our journey through Judges the last several weeks, there's been times where I'm like, can I still say that? Can I still say that this may be my favorite book in the Bible? And I am going to continue to say yes. But the reason that I love it now, and I think it is so important now, is different than when I first read it when I was a junior high boy. And I think that's something that we should remember, that when we read the Bible, every time we read the Bible, we are a different person than when we last read the Bible.
That's right.
Because our own experiences with the world, but also with the grace of Jesus, are transformative. And so when we bring our experience to Scripture and we read these stories, we have a different lens, or maybe a refined lens, to better understand why this book is in here. Why is this included in the canon? Why is this so important? And so, yeah, so my read of Judges is still like, oh, this is such a powerful and important book. But it comes down to, it reminds us of our desperate need of a Savior.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is very important for me. Yeah, it's a hard book to read, though. It gets harder the older I get. It gets harder to read because the brutality of it is just heartbreaking. So, but thank you all for enduring these last chapters, because they're intense. Next week, we are starting our group's break. And so we will pause for May, and then we'll come back in June when groups start up again. And we'll pick up with Ruth. But we're gonna just do Ruth in 1 week. So I'm gonna like tag it on to our first Samuel section, because I have a friend who makes the graphics that I use for this, and I don't want him to make a graphic for 1 week. So I just try to save him some time. So it'll be we'll like kind of jump in with Samuel, because from Judges to Ruth to Samuel is a transition into the line of David, is what we're getting to. And so so it makes sense to kind of package those together in my mind. So yeah, so y'all have a great week. I'll see you Sunday. And yeah, we will be back together again in June. So, all right.
Sounds good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
God bless everyone.
You also. Thank you for everything, Jason.
You betcha. Good night.